Welcome to the TRU Leader Podcast. Today, our special guest is Matt Hollingsworth, co-founder of Carta Healthcare. We have a great conversation about how to leverage AI to revolutionize healthcare processes and optimize health outcomes. Don't miss it.
Welcome to the TRU Leader Podcast. I'm Dr. Tracy Christofferson.
And I'm Michelle Trosett.
We are life and business besties, leadership coaches and mentors, and polarity intelligence experts. We're the authors of Polarity Intelligence, The Missing Logic in Leadership, and co-founders of Missing Logic.
We are here to help high-achieving leaders break through leadership norms that cause them suffering at work and home. If you're looking to elevate your leadership, increasing your productivity, effectiveness, and impact, and manage your health and well-being, spend quality time with those you love, and live your best life, then you are in the right place.
Our goal in this podcast is to equip you with new ways of thinking and practical and tactical strategies for succeeding at work and thriving in life. Think of this podcast as your weekly dose of personal and professional development so you can reach your full leadership potential, create a life you love, and be what we are calling a thriving, resilient, and unstoppable or true leader.
If you are ready to learn and laugh a little, let's get started. Welcome to the TRU Leader Podcast. This is Michelle, and I am with...
Tracy.
Yeah, last time I checked, that's who it was.
Yep, here we are. The dynamic duo.
Yes, and we just concluded another great interview with a guest. And I was thinking, Tracy, the things I love about the guest interviews is just the people we meet, the stories they tell, and I always learn something new.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Always learning. Always learning.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's fun to meet different people whose paths you might not cross in any other way, right?
Right.
So, yeah. And this young gentleman is just full of energy and inspiration, and he's really doing some incredible work, I think, in the healthcare space at this point in time. And who knows where his journey will take him.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, and he's really making a difference, and I love his energy and his passion, and then also just his advice to kind of learn from the past too when it comes to the work that he's doing. So you just wait, listeners, you're going to like this episode.
Yeah. So what we're referring to is, of course, our interview with Matt Hollingsworth. And so I am going to introduce Matt to you, and then you can listen to this incredible interview yourself. So here we go. Matt Hollingsworth is the co-founder of Carta Healthcare. His passion for improving patient care developed while helping his mother, a 5-time cancer survivor, navigate the U.S. healthcare system and communicate her conditions to providers. In 2017, Matt founded Carta Healthcare, dedicated to creating a healthier future by advancing the technology surrounding data practices in healthcare. So today, Carta Healthcare is a leader in delivering improved data gathering solutions to healthcare systems related to a patient's diagnosis, treatment, and outcomes. Carta Healthcare solutions have revolutionized the processes surrounding registry databases, resulting in markedly faster data collection, superior quality of data, and considerable cost savings for healthcare providers. Matt holds an MBA from Stanford University, where he also worked in the systems utilization research for Stanford Medicine Lab and researching methods for using information technology to reduce equipment waste and improve patient care. So without further ado, here's our interview with Matt Hollingsworth. Well, welcome to the TRU Leader Podcast. We're so excited to have you with us, Matt.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We've been looking forward to today.
Me too.
It's finally arrived. So here we are. So let's not hesitate. Let's just dive right in. All right.
Absolutely.
So we know that you have a very personal why that has related to your journey in improving healthcare and the patient's journey. So I just wondered if you'd share a little bit about that with our listeners, Matt.
Absolutely. And there in fact two, actually. There's the one that got started and the one that also keeps me going. So I'll just give a brief summary for both of them. So what brought me to this space first is my mom has had cancer lots of times. And really the most recent one was the one that motivated me to get interested in healthcare in the first place, because it was the first one I've experienced as an adult and the first time that I had some idea about what was going on outside of just being scared about the outcomes, basically. And so I got to see where she was going and a lot of the challenges that she ran into. And in particular, she's had cancer so many times that she has an extremely complex medical history that needs to be communicated every time she goes to see a new care team. And on the third or fourth time she was doing this, and this is, communicate sounds like a simple problem, but it takes half an hour to describe everything she's done. She's had 31 surgeries at this point and is on a cocktail of drugs. Like all these things you have to know about when you take care of her. If you don't, then you risk killing her, and that's kind of defeats the purpose. So it's important that you know what's going on. And so it would take a good half hour to do it every time. And most of that time would be spent typing data into the electronic medical record system. And so at some point I was just like, well, where is this going? Right? Kind of the point of this was supposed to be to reduce documentation. It seems like it has had no impact whatsoever. At least before, people could fax around handwritten notes and they would have to ask the same thing over and over again. And so I just got a little confused about what's going on, and a very naive question at the time, but it was enough to get me interested in it and started digging in, and found that if I really wanted to make a big difference in it, I ought to go study it. And so ended up going to Stanford's business school to focus on healthcare operations, and then sort of the rest is history. But the other sort of personal thing that this one I couldn't have foreseen, obviously, but after we started the company, so just a little bit, I probably will end up mentioning this in more detail later when we talk about the company and stuff, but the first thing we ever did was applied the stuff we do to congenital heart patients. And I did that while I was still a researcher at Stanford. And one of the things that they that we did together was study these congenital heart patients and figure out, is there a way that we could improve the sort of outcomes for them. And so it was the team at Stanford Children's that I was working with on that. And fast forward 4 years, we just had a kid, and she was born with one of these things that we were studying, which was very, very strange. It's called a transposition of the great arteries. There's 3,000 to 4,000 patients a year for it. So it's a very rare thing. And I ended up going back to the same people that we started the company alongside at Stanford to take care of her, and she's doing very well. And so anyway, main point here is it's motivating, but also helps. I mean, I knew this already, but now I've really lived this. But the healthcare system is the one thing that all of us are going to have to interact with at some point in our lives. We come into it and we leave in it, and it's just at everything in between, and we're always going to have to deal with it one way or the other. And so the better we can make it, it's great. I was originally motivated by helping other people, but then this was one of those things where I remembered that oh yeah, this is also going to affect me too. And so it's like another dimension of motivating that I think you kind of can't get until you have one of these sort of things happen to you to some degree. I knew it academically, but it's different now. Let's put it that way. So, so anyway, that's where.
Yeah. Wow. Two significant life events and experiences that are influencing your passion. And Michelle and I spent a lot of time in our history in working with the electronic health record, but also just with helping clinicians to gather the patient story. So that is an important part of really understanding what patients are going through, not just the medical aspects, but their story as well. And so I just really applaud what you're trying to do and appreciate it, and appreciate the struggles with trying to gather that story. Right. And be sitting on the other side of that, really, come on. Why can't we do this easier? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what a story about your child as well. It's almost like, there was some divine setup for what was going to be coming down the pipe for you.
It was very improbable. Funny enough, when my wife and I were discussing having kids, like my big thing at the time was like, I really don't want the kid to be born with one of these defects. So that, like, I have this weird class of knowledge for that space because I just know everything that can go wrong. Like, that's kind of the point. But I'm not a clinician, so like, there's nothing I could do about it. And so I had this, what we both decided was an irrational fear that this was going to happen. And then it did anyway, because I mean, it's extremely rare, right? Like, it's less than 1% of the population end up with these. And this particular one was one of those that, like, a few decades ago was a complete 100% death sentence. Like, it just, you can't live unless it's fixed, and we've only been able to fix it for a few decades. So anyway,
wow.
It's very, very improbable. But
yeah, for sure. Well, with that story drop behind us, when did you know you were going to become an entrepreneur to really make a difference? Like, when did you realize that?
Good question. So for me, I didn't really set out to do entrepreneurship per se. Like, there are problems I wanted to work on, and I would have been perfectly fine joining something that was already out there doing it, but there wasn't anything that was doing it, at least in a way that I felt like was going to work. So I was kind of, I guess I backed into the entrepreneurship thing because I had this very, like, specific class of problem I wanted to work on, and I couldn't see anything out there that was doing it in a way that I felt like would work. And so I decided to try to go it my own way. So I guess that's maybe less satisfying than, like, if I was, like, set out to do this, but it's really just, I feel like the thing that motivates me the most is solving problems that I care about, and so the entrepreneurship thing was a means to an end, if you will. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense. It makes total sense, right? And so you found a need. And and then you really felt like you had the wherewithal to fill that need, that you had some unique contribution to make. And I think that's great. I think it happens for a lot of entrepreneurs. Actually, they don't set out to do something, but they see a gap and they feel like there's something I can do here to make a bigger contribution. So good for you for taking that on. And you've been very successful with it, and successful with kind of leveraging this standardized data entry along with, documentation with AI. Like, the combination of things that you're doing are really incredible. And can you just share with our listeners a little bit more about Carta Healthcare, what it does, and, like, some of these outcomes that you've been able to achieve as a part of the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So yeah, the backstory here, I think a lot of people understand that there is a lot of documentation that needs to happen to make the world go around in the realm of healthcare, but it's kind of hard to, like, understand just how much there is. So like a thing I like to do is just take a very specific example, because this is one of those things that feels, I think, really esoteric to people who just say, like, clinicians have to spend a lot of time documenting, and, like, make it extremely concrete. So there's okay, so first backdrop here. One of the things that we all want to happen is for quality to improve for a particular thing. And that's a very nebulous thing, but one way to think about that is that you can pick a condition that somebody has and follow a big group of people who have that condition treated and see how people do after the treatment happens. And you can compare different treatments, and, like, if they come in with this and leave with that, then, like, you can understand ways to mitigate, like, comorbidities like diabetes. Like, is there something we can change in the way that we treat this patient that will give them a better outcome, this sort of thing. So, and the way people think about it, because, again, like, the whole health system is extremely complex, and there's a lot going on inside the human body, you have to pick, like, something to study. And so the way that this works in real life is there are these big data sets called registries, where you pick a particular disease state or treatment or, like, some dimension that is concrete enough that you can sort of hold on to it and start doing research on it. And just to give an example of this, there's a very large registry that the American College of Cardiology oversees. It's called cath-PCI. And these are it's a cath-based cardiovascular intervention that can help people that have blocked blood vessels, basically. It's the very short answer for it. And this is a very effective treatment for people who have that particular problem with their cardiovascular system. And so, and there's this procedure that you do, And cath-PCI, every time one of these procedures is done, you document what happened. And not only what happened, but what brought the patient there. Like, how old were they? What was their weight? Did they have diabetes? Did they not? Like, were they hypertensive coming in? If so, how bad? Like, all these things that you need to know. And on the outcome front, you track that later, figure out how they're doing after the surgery. And did things get better? Did they get worse? Did something new happen? Are they still alive? Like, very important metrics for measuring outcomes. And this whole process allows you to correlate just sort of cause and effect. Like, this was the incoming state and this was the outgoing state after this procedure. And then people that are clinicians can look at that data and be like, I have an idea for how I can make, this one metric go up. Like, decreased mortality is a very, top of the list one all the time, but also like remove the like hypotension population that comes out of this. Like, make sure that we prevent that. Like, I have an idea for how to do that, or, make sure that they stay on the drugs that we send them. So that's what this is all about. And there are hundreds of these registries because there are millions of different clinical conditions that you can have. And so these registries are a mechanism for studying what needs to happen. Now, this is one use case of a huge array of different documentation. But again, just to like make this really concrete here, someone has to collect that, and that is documentation. And there are a million other things you need to collect data for, like obviously to cut bills or to figure out what is an insurable, like how to insure a particular population effectively, or, there are a million different things you have to document. This is just one of the million. And so, and then to sort of give an idea about how long this takes, just order of magnitude, the procedure takes about an hour. And this form takes between an hour and an hour and a half to complete. So it's one of those things that's like, you actually end up spending more nursing time filling this form out than you did doing the actual procedure. And one thing you can walk away with from that is like, oh, this is stupid. Like, why are we filling out so many forms or whatever? The answer is that's how we improve. And so like, this isn't one of those things that's as simple as like, you just need to sit down and be like, stop with the bureaucracy or something. It's not bureaucracy. It's just, we need the data from somewhere, and how else are we going to make it, right? So it's like, It's just really hard, and it just takes a lot of time, and that's the reality of it. And so that's the use case that I wanted to focus on, because broadly, like, I guess you guys will probably introduce this at some point, but my background is as an AI engineer, and so I like looking at data sets like that to figure out patterns and ways that people can improve things. But if we need an hour to an hour and a half of nurse time to do every sort of thing that's out there from a disease state wise, we don't have that much money. We don't have that many nurses. Forget just the money. Like, we just don't have enough nurses to do that if we wanted to. So I care about this because getting access, like getting these data sets created, if we need as much nursing time and money that's associated with that to collect these as we do today, then that's going to be the primary bottleneck. And it is the primary bottleneck for the sort of types and amount of research that we can do in this space. So if you wanted to go out and do a clinical effectiveness project, like a good 3/4 of your grant money is going to go to collecting data for it, at least, some of them even more. So it's just, as long as that problem exists, then the sort of cap to the effectiveness that we could generate with all these awesome new modern data science techniques is very, very low. And so I cared a lot about this also because not only is this like useful for data, just general data creation, this is also the same problem that keeps people from being able to communicate stuff amongst each other, because like the EHRs were built to communicate digitally, but somebody has to create that digital data in the first place. And so it's also the same problem that's plaguing that space in general, which ties it back to like how I sort of wormed my way into this particular use case, because it turns out that from a technical perspective, it's the same exact problem. You have to have nurses go out and fill out these huge forms, and they don't have time to do that in all cases. And so because people can't do it consistently, the process is to just ask everybody again, what's your medical history? Because something probably got missed before. And so just if very fundamentally you could change the paradigm there, make it so that you didn't need as much time to do this documentation, everybody'd be better off. We'd be able to do more research for less money. We'd have less nurse time wasted on documentation, et cetera. So that's sort of what brought me here. Now, the problem we solve is very, like Carta today, what we focus on is submitting data to these registries. We support a few dozen of them. And basically just what we'll do is we'll come into a hospital and say, hey, hospital, we'll collect this on your behalf, and it's going to be order of magnitude half as expensive to work with us, and we'll be able to have a lot faster turnaround time. You'll never run out of, or you'll never be behind again. We'll have really high quality. So we have all these sort of mechanisms that we hold ourselves accountable for delivering a better experience. And we do that by having a technology stack help us collect data, of which the technology stack includes AI, as I mentioned. The AI engineer is a big part of it. And also just things that this has been a neglected space for a long time. So we could just also help with workflow and help get the data to the places that it can actually be impactful and all that sort of stuff. So that's what we do in a nutshell and why we do it. And the outcome of this is that people will need a lot less resources to get the same amount and quality of data. And that means you can repurpose those resources to do stuff that is more useful, like figuring out ways to improve quality and that sort of thing. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's great. And, no one likes taking time doing the same thing over and over again when they know that there are other more valuable ad services they could be doing as well. And I imagine I'm imagining that as time goes on, more and more information needs to be collected. It's probably changed quite a bit too, as we really enter this whole big data era as well. Yeah. So that's great.
Well, absolutely. And that's one of the many reasons why I like working in this space also, because not carefully designed AI can do things like displace jobs or do stuff that is, less than wonderful for our society broadly. This is one of those things where there's so much work to do. It's just, there's a mountain of it and we're walking up the first step, and this will help us walk 3 steps of it. But I mean, there is no limit to the amount of resources we want to deploy to the quality improvement initiatives. So there's a limited amount of resources that are out there, but if you can take those same resources, which means the same group of people that's working on it, and let them do more, then it's one of those things where there's not going to be any job loss. It's just there's going to be more value and less frustrating work for everybody. So it's a great side effect from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of issues here that are at play and being addressed, right? And clinicians do not want to spend their time filling out forms. That's not why they got into healthcare. They don't, they don't want to spend all their time documenting. And yet you need the data, the information, right, to be able to improve care, reduce complications, right, improve outcomes, all of that. So it's been a double-edged sword for a long, long time, because somebody, needed to enter the data, and that seemed to be the person closest to the bedside, right? So it's been an ongoing problem for a very, very long time. So it's really great to see some adjustments and some changes and ways to be more resourceful as leaders in today's, just state. It's just been so much going on in healthcare, right? And it's just been upside down for a while, right? Especially with the resource availability, like you said, and then just some of the challenges that we've been facing over the last few years since the pandemic, really. So it's really great to see some new approaches. Love it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy and I, we recently did a podcast, Matt, on the polarity or interdependency of artificial intelligence and human intelligence. And since you brought up job replacements, this is a real fear for some people. Are they going to need me anymore? And what have you learned about the need for human intelligence while you are creating these new innovations with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say my entire career of doing this, I've never run into a case where the application of AI removes a human from a process entirely. And just in our case, for instance, the AI can fill out a chunk of the form, but there's a big chunk that it can't. And even the stuff that it can, it needs to be checked nine times out of 10. So there still needs to be a human there. So what it does is it speeds up what the human can do. And also it can help it. So machines are good at some things, humans are good at others. For instance, machines are very good at doing basic arithmetic. So if there's a conversion from kilograms to pounds, well, probably a machine is going to do a better job of that. Sure, someone can, multiply it by 2 point whatever, if they want to, but they're probably going to mess it up at some point, and like a machine is never going to mess that up. So it's one of those things where like it's better to rely on machines for some things. But the medical system, just everything about it is too complex for AI to take over for it entirely. It just everything about it. Just that a lot of things don't make any sense. Like the way that things are documented don't necessarily, like they don't translate across institutions. So maybe you figure out something at Stanford, but it doesn't work at UCSF or whatever, just because people document things differently. But humans are really good at this extremely high level reasoning. They can figure out reasonable translations between them. And it's like, okay, well, they call this a different acronym here, or they have a different place to like if they don't do this in HOP, they do this in a like follow-up progress note or whatever. Like they can figure these things out. That sort of level of reasoning is extremely difficult for a machine, and it can learn over time. But how does it learn? Well, like people have to tell it that that's there, and that takes human time too. And so just like I was mentioning that there's these registries that are done at a like disease state level. If you look at the coding systems that are out there, there are, depending on which one you want to look at, like SNOMED is millions of concepts, and like ICDs, tens of thousands or whatever, and there's everything in between. But like every single one of those is a whole like company's worth of engineering that you could do to figure out everything that's relevant for that particular disease state, and no one is ever going to get to that. Like the way that it works for us is we go after the things that are really common, like diabetes, for instance. I was using that because that's like there's so much prevalence there that you have enough data, and then the juice is worth the squeeze to like train a model that can figure out whether a patient is diabetic or not. But like my daughter, the transmission of the great arteries, like 3,000 of these a year, and like the probability that you're going to run into enough patients to train an AI algorithm to like identify everything that's relevant to that population is low at best, and it's just not worth your time. Like you can spend it doing other things that are taking time. But like main point here, like to put this in numbers, like I think you probably need 100,000 people working for 50 years to get to the point where they could even start replicating some of what the nurses do with the current state of AI. And it's not evolving quickly enough that statement's going to change meaningfully over the next 2 decades or so. So it's one of those things where like, I think what people are spending their time doing will be a little bit different, but not much. And it's going to use the same skill sets that they already have, and they'll just be able to do more with their time. So I think, and what I'm saying here is true 99.9% of the time. There are a few cases where like it eliminates so much of the time that jobs can disappear, but like I think people think that like writers or that sort of thing will be a real problematic thing, but anybody who's like, you're going to need that, they're going to spend their time being an editor, not an author as much, and that's great for everybody. We'll be able to produce better content with less time, and nobody is ever going to say like stop writing great novels or books or movies or anything like that. So it's just like, I mean, this has happened countless times in history. Like my wife works in architecture, and so like this is another example. Everyone was afraid when the CAD systems came out that all the architects were going to lose their jobs, because I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of old school like architecture firms, but there's like a huge floor of people that are just sitting there drafting all day. That's like they spend 99% of their time doing that, and like 1% of their time talking about designs or whatever. And yeah, that all went away, and then they all got to work on designs instead. And now everyone wants 5 possible designs instead of the like one design that comes from an architecture firm, because that's what we could do. And now that's become the norm. Just everything is like that. Even I would say probably the most successful examples of machine learning came from that, like manufacturing quality control is a good, like where they use image recognition to do things, and even in those cases, like what happens is they run through the process, it kicks out something, and then there's a person who checks it to figure out like, is it actually wrong, and if it's wrong, how's it wrong, and how. So it's one of those things where it improves productivity. So I'm not aware of anything that's completely removed. I do think that some just general like careers and things will have a big transformation that happens, but I don't think it's going to be that rapid. And I also think that the skill sets that will be needed still are going to be very similar, and they'll need a similar number of people. It's just you're going to get higher productivity out of the same group of people, which is really good for all of us. It just means things get cheaper net, and people have fewer I think bottom line here is that what AI is good at is stuff that almost every human is going to find boring. And so, like, I think mostly people's jobs are just going to get more interesting. Is just like in the writing case, figuring out ideas and like sketching out something is the hardest and most time consuming part. Editing is by far, order of magnitude more difficult, more interesting, takes more skill. Like storytelling at a high level, like all the stuff that still needs a human brain is still going to need a human brain. We're just going to be spending a larger portion of our time doing that rather than the mechanics of chugging out some language and, as a first draft that we need to edit. Right. It's just, and I think everything is like that to some degree.
Yeah. Well, I just really appreciate your perspective on that. And I know it's clearly we're in an evolutionary time right now. And so let's just make the most of it. And then, let's bring the value of where we can be spending our time. And it's impossible to know everything. We really need this type of technology to kind of bring things to us so that we can deliver care better. We can spend more time with patients. We can be more creative because like legwork's already been done. So, and it really, I think it's reframing it in our own mind, what this really means to have this dynamic balance between artificial intelligence and still my human intelligence, my human perspectives. It's going to be equally important.
Absolutely. And it's it'll be a great thing as long as we're careful about how we use it. And especially in the medical field, like it's a very physical, I mean, you have to be there with people at some point. And like, until we have just, completely humanoid robots running around and doing stuff, which I don't think is going to happen in the lifetime of any people on this call, at least. Maybe there's some people being born into it that will, but we've got a long way to go before that's like, there's so many things that would have to happen for that to be a thing that anybody would even want, much less be able to execute on. And I think we're a long way away from that. But I think today we can use these tools to help docs and nurses be more effective with less boring work now. And that's great. And so as long as we're careful, like all this has a caveat of we need to stick with the rules we already have. Like, if you're giving diagnoses or something, you need to go through a clinical trial. Like, don't skip that. Like, that's a bad idea. There's anything that's touching patients needs to have a lot of rigor around what's going on. But it's, as long as we stick to the rules that we already have and don't act like AI is some other thing that needs its own set of rules that are more lax or whatever so that people can develop things quicker, then I think we'll be in a wonderful shape. We just need to make sure that we hang on to our own rules that we already have.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I like what you're saying too about, there are certain guardrails, right, that will kind of guide us to the most beneficial use of AI. And we know when critical thinking is needed. And that's the human element here, right? We have to be able to identify when is the critical thinking needed that AI can't provide. And so I think there's a lot of benefit, and it's skill development, right? So while some skills may not be needed anymore, others will be. So it's an opportunity for growth and evolution of the skill development of individuals and opportunities to contribute in different ways. And so there's a lot of positivity that can come out of it, and it can really help us to see things differently than what we might, to problem solve differently than we might be able to problem solve, given there are limitations to our human intelligence. We can only look at so much data, exactly. So I think there's just a lot of different applications for it. Right. And, but tread, lightfully and intentionally, and just be aware and use it, in the best possible ways and learn from it. I think that's where we're at, right? Just a lot of learning. And I think it's just happening so fast for people. Change is not always easy.
Yes,
when it's coming at you like a bullet train, right? It's kind of like, whoa.
Yeah, no, I think on that note, that's a great point. Like, I feel like people feel like this is moving faster than it actually is in a lot of cases. Like, the thing that happened last year with ChatGPT being introduced and everyone getting used to the idea that this is like a thing that's out there has been a long time coming. Actually, it's not like this like just suddenly appeared out of left field and like just the way to think about it, like, change is scariest when it is very high rate of change. And I think people in real life, this whole process started back in the 40s when neural networks were first created. And we've just been slowly plodding along, figuring stuff out ever since the 1940s. But people feel like for people who haven't been in the like field of AI engineering or AI research, feel like that it just like appeared a few years ago. Like some that were familiar with it first, like got to interact with it in the form of image recognition and some of the stuff that Google started putting out with being able to like search for dog and it finds images of dog or whatever. But most people, I think, didn't really interact with AI until ChatGPT came along, and it was really easy for people to sit down and have a chat with it. And that was pretty revolutionary. And so people, like, I think in a lot of people's mind, the time, like the beginning point started last year sometime, and now all this stuff is coming out. Now they're actually actively reading about AI and finding all this other stuff that it's been able to do for many, many, many years. And it feels like it's going faster than it actually was in real life. So it's one of those things where, like, the thing that's changing right now is the adoption of it. People looking at it and actively seeking it out and understanding what it can do for them and this sort of thing, which was extremely revolutionary. And I think that the dam sort of broke with the release of ChatGPT last year. But like to sort of temper the like fear that this is just like spit it out of control and it's like, becoming sentient or something like that, like, this has been going on for a very, 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 very long time. All of it. In the generative stuff, conservatively, like the current block of work started back in 2018 at the very latest. Like if you want to, when people started using the term Gen AI in like a wide breadth. And so like at the very least, that's the like worst that it's been. And it's taken many years before anybody got to interact with it. But in real life, the research for this has been going on much longer than that, way, 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 way longer. So it's just, it's less concerning from that perspective that the whole world is changing in some fundamental way, on a month by month time scale. Right. It's just, we've been working on this for a long time and people are just now understanding just how cool it is in a lot of ways. And that can be scary. But I don't like, it's not like suddenly Skynet, to reference Terminator, is going to like take over the nuclear arsenal and blow everybody up. Right?
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Oh, we can sleep at night, Tracy.
Exactly.
All right. Now I don't got to worry. Well, I really appreciate you bringing that perspective that this has really been going on for a long time. There's just been a lot of research and a lot of things happening that people just haven't been exposed to. So appreciate you bringing that forth. That's very helpful for people. Well, we've reached a time where we start to talk about our mystery questions here, Matt. Now, we haven't used AI to generate these or anything, but we just like our listeners to get to know the true you, a little bit more about you and you personally. And I'm going to start with the first question, and Michelle will follow up. So, the first question we want to ask is, as an entrepreneur in technology, what do you do to unplug?
Good question. I love playing board games. That's a big one. I have a group of friends that I really enjoy doing that with. And I live very close to beautiful park in San Francisco called Golden Gate Park that like there's enough hiking ability over here that you can just do that for as much time as you could give it. And I love going for walks with my wife and my kid, and just that's the most relaxing thing for me generally. I also play piano. There was some world in which back in college I was double majoring in physics and piano performance actually, so I really like playing piano still, but at this point it's a hobby. I'm not but the first thing I was ever paid to do is like play for weddings and stuff like that. So I still enjoy music a lot too. So those are the main things.
What's your favorite board game?
Oh, that evolves rapidly. I'd say right now it's this one called Terraforming Mars, which is just it's a good balance between not too long and but complicated enough that there are some cool strategies you can take and things like that. But it's a really great one. And I also just love going to Settlers of Catan and that sort of stuff. That's really great as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
Great. I always like to know what people do to unplug. Those are some great things. All right. The second question is, what is your favorite kind of book to read, fiction or nonfiction, and why?
Good question. I do almost exactly 50-50, strangely enough. So,
okay.
And it would be hard. It just depends on the month, which one I'm doing more or less of. I like both a lot, but I think the reason I oscillate between them, fiction is usually entertainment. With nonfiction, I'm usually reading it for a purpose. I use that to understand, for instance, years ago, read a bunch about the way the registries work and how they came to be and all this sort of stuff, and which I find really interesting. And it's both entertaining and useful for the professional life versus the other things are just pure entertainment, which would fit under the unplug side. And usually I'm doing the fiction reading in an audiobook when I'm doing chores or something. So it's they span a little bit different, but I like them both for different reasons. But I would be willing to bet, if I had some way to measure this, I bet I spend about half and half almost exactly on those two topics generally. So that's a good question.
Yeah, well, great. Now we know a little bit more about the true you. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well balanced, Matt. We're all about balance.
That's right. That's good.
Oh, well, thanks so much. This has been a delightful interview, and I just really like your fresh perspectives on a topic that is pretty hot right now, and just your own personal connections to it, man. I think our listeners are really going to like it, and I know that Tracy and I really enjoyed getting to know your story and what Carta Healthcare is doing. So, thank you so much for coming on our show. And
of course, thanks for having me. It was wonderful to meet you both, and this was very enjoyable. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. It was really, really refreshing. And I just really appreciate the attention to something that's been a challenge for a very long time. And I think too, I know that we have a lot of listeners that are healthcare clinicians and leaders, but I love that that's not where you came from, right? You came from the other side of the bed. And and so I think it's what you started out with today about this is applicable to all of us, because whether you're a healthcare provider or a leader in healthcare or a consumer of healthcare or the significant other or family member of somebody who's receiving healthcare, all of this has an impact on each and every one of us. So I think it's just really a great topic and some deeper understanding for individuals in all ways around how things like this are having a positive impact on healthcare and on the care ultimately that they may receive someday. So thanks so much for bringing that.
Absolutely. Yep, I agreed with all. And thanks again for giving me a chance to chat about this. I always find it fun. Find people who actually care about it. It's great.
Do you have any closing remarks or advice for our listeners before we wrap it up, Matt?
I think main thing would be to just go back to what I was talking about with the understanding where all of these cool technologies came from. I think it wouldn't take a lot of reading, kind of to your question about the nonfiction reading. For anybody listening, I would highly recommend going and reading some of the history behind this stuff. It's really interesting and will help take some of the magic out of this, because it's really not magic. It's all just applied statistics. You can know exactly what's gonna come out of it as a function of what you put in. And it wouldn't take. It's not one of those things where you nobody's going to Stanford and getting some sort of esoteric knowledge that nobody else has. It's really not magic. It's not esoteric. It's really just good old fashioned applied math, and it's very interesting. So finding summaries that you can read about the history and how all this stuff came to be and why people cared about it in the first place and all this sort of thing. And again, the term neural network started in the 1940s just to whet people's appetite. So it's been going on a long time, and there's a lot of cool stories around sort of the origins of it and where it came from, and would be very entertaining. and also informative, given that this is going to be a big part of our society going forward. And I think it'd be worth every minute that people spend reading a little bit about the history of it. So
I think that's great advice.
Yeah. And if you have any suggestions, we'll put them in the show notes.
Absolutely. I could send a couple of books that would be a good place to start and go from there.
That'd be great.
That would be really great. So how can our listeners find you?
Great question. LinkedIn, Matt Hollingsworth, Carta Healthcare will get it. That's one easy one. And that's probably the easiest one because that'll connect to everything else that other ways you can connect with me are there. So that'd be a place to start, I think.
Great.
Okay. We like people to be able to find you after they hear all this wisdom and more about what your company's doing, Matt. So thanks again. And thank you to all of our listeners out there. We appreciate you so much tuning in every week. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. I mean, there's a lot of information in here that we would like as many people to hear as possible. And leave a review too. Let us know what you thought. That would be very helpful. And subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so that you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to see us on video, make sure you subscribe to our Missing Logic YouTube channel. And until next time, stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you then.